reliable, consistent work ethic. Now, these are all characteristics of veterans. They're all characteristics of veterans. Commitment, loyalty. I mean, if you're an employer, is there one of those traits that you don't value very highly in people working in your organization? Of course not. And those don't get taught in schools. Those are characteristics of individuals, and they can be formed. People can learn them at different points in life. But my experience is when people are coming out of the military, they've already got them all. They've got them all. One of the things I did in private practice was I worked for a Vietnam vet as a lawyer. And so I did some courts-martial. And Quantico mostly, some at Fort Belvoir. You know, it's interesting, if you go to the brig at Quantico, if you were just to stand at the brig and look in 360 degrees, I defy you to find a country club for 50 miles that's as meticulously kept as the brig at Quantico. And that's because even when they've gotten on the wrong track, and we all make mistakes, and people in the military are no exception, what that shows me is the core that's still there, even at the brig. Now, it isn't where I wanted to visit clients. More importantly, it isn't where they wanted me to visit as clients. But it tells you something, even in a part of military service we certainly don't think about very much, but I worked with as an attorney. You know, that is still there. That core is there. And it is incredibly valuable for Virginia to be blessed to have such a high proportion of our citizens who are veterans. There's a lot there for us. Now, when you look at that and the fact that the unemployment rate among veterans is higher than the national average, substantially higher than the national average, it's over 10%. Now, that's something I want to do something about, and that we have focused a lot of our attention. The focus of my race is on job creation across our society, across Virginia. But this is a huge piece of Virginia in a lot of ways. Unlike my opponent, I've spent my whole life putting Virginians first, long before I was running for office, but that includes our veterans. When I was in private practice back in the 90s, I worked for a group called the Pro Bono Veterans Consortium, which works with the American Legion, and works with PAV, and works with all of the VFW, all the veterans organizations. And what I did there was, when a veteran was not getting, I know this will shock you all, not getting treated fairly within the VA. You've never seen that, have you, Mr. They'd go through 3 layers of bureaucracy and for disability ratings. And at that point, if they still hadn't been addressed fairly, then it went to a lawyer. And I was one of those lawyers who would then take those cases into the court, then called the Court of Veterans Appeals. They changed the name every few years. And so I got to go into the bowels of the VA and the record room and all those sorts of things. And it's a learning experience, just to be in there with the records. And it is one, and I never thought it at the time, but 10 years later, when I was the Attorney General, and my client, who oversees more than a couple of dozen of those agents who help our veterans, I brought some personal experience and motivation to expanding the training and formalizing the training for some of those DVS agents from my lawyers. Now, I couldn't have done that without someone leading DVS who was open to that cooperation. I'm very appreciative to Paul Galante for that. But that is private sector experience. It was largely charitable work that was done for its own sake. But those kinds of experiences have a way of coming back and being valuable, especially when you enter a different form of public service as a policymaker. And I didn't think about that at the time, but I've done an awful lot of other things as well. With the homeless, fighting sexual assault, juvenile delinquency prevention, the list goes on. Those are investments in Virginia that I believe someone who's asking to lead your state as governor should have made somewhere along the line. And that hasn't happened on the other side of this race.
Amen.
It is a major difference in this race. And that goes to commitment to Virginia. And that's important, and I know it's important to veterans. As Attorney General, in addition to expanding those training offerings with the DVS agents, and this is important for those of you who haven't been through this process, you know, every time you don't end up where you should, it's another 1.5 years, 2 years. And it is slow, it is arduous, it is frustrating. And so my motivation was, if our agents can just get a little better and a little better year after year, for every one of those rounds we cut off, we make a veteran's life 2 years easier and reduce blood pressure and frustration and other things sooner. We also have deployed our reservists and guardsmen in the last 10 years more than for a very long period in going back in our history. I don't know how far back you've got to go. And everybody has this sort of notion in the back of their head, well, you know, when you get called up, you leave your job, you go serve your country again, and you come back and you reassume your job. Well, one thing I learned is that when that law called USERA, the Unemployment Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, only in the federal government.